I used to believe I was happily married. James and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. We had the house, the golden retriever, the dinner parties with friends that made it seem like we had it all figured out. But something changed when I started my new job. My boss, Alan, was charming, calm under pressure, and deeply understanding. More than I expected from someone in his position. It started innocently, late meetings, shared coffee breaks, and the occasional joke that lingered too long. He noticed things James didn't anymore, the new perfume when I seemed tired, when my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. Then came that night. We had to stay late to work on a client pitch. The rest of the office cleared out. I remember him leaning against the desk, sleeves rolled up, voice softer than usual. When he walked over and locked the office door, it was like the silence in the room shifted. My heart pounded, not out of fear, but from the sheer awareness of what was about to happen. But it didn't start with touching, it started with truth. He asked, "Are you happy, really?" And for the first time, I didn't lie. The affair didn't explode in passion that night, but it started emotionally, text messages that bled into the night, conversations that dug into our fears, hopes, and the secret loneliness we both carried. A month later, things turned physical. At first, it felt like relief, like someone finally saw me, but then came the guilt. I would look at James across the dinner table and wonder how he didn't know. I cried in the shower. I kept secrets in my phone, in my body, in my eyes. It lasted 7 months, until James found a message. He didn't yell. He just said, "You love him." I didn't have an answer, because it wasn't love. It was recognition of something missing, of something broken in me, in us. Alan and I didn't last. He was married too. What I learned, infidelity doesn't always start with sex. It starts with being emotionally seen by someone else. And once that door is locked, literally or not, it's hard to come back the same. Power dynamics in the workplace can subtly, and sometimes dangerously, shift the emotional landscape between two individuals, especially when one person holds authority over the other. In the case of romantic or emotionally intimate relationships that begin between a boss and an employee, the imbalance of power often sets the stage for a deeper kind of emotional dependency that becomes difficult to identify until it's already too late. Unlike casual flirtations or surface-level infatuations, these situations often emerge from consistent exposure, trust building, and the day-to-day vulnerabilities that people share in high-stress work environments. Over time, the lines between mentorship, support, and emotional intimacy begin to blur, often under the guise of professionalism. When a superior offers validation, encouragement, and personal attention, especially to someone feeling neglected or undervalued in their personal life, it creates an opening for emotional connection and eventually emotional dependence. In real-life accounts, many who've been involved in workplace affairs speak of how seen or heard they felt by their boss, feelings that may have been absent in their current romantic relationships. When someone in power offers a consistent space of comfort and affirmation, it becomes easy to confuse professional camaraderie for something more intimate. In many cases, it's not a manipulative power grab, but a slow, mutual escalation. The subordinate, often initially grateful for the recognition and attention, begins to anticipate moments of interaction with this person. Their approval starts to matter in a way that surpasses the boundaries of professionalism. The authority figure, meanwhile, might be drawn to the admiration and trust shown by someone who relies on them, not just for career advancement, but for emotional reassurance. This type of relationship builds quietly, often unnoticed by others, and is largely internal, emotional, and intense. Before anything overtly inappropriate happens, the bond itself may already feel like a betrayal to a spouse or partner at home. This emotional dependency becomes more complicated when the relationship turns secretive. The very fact that it needs to be hidden adds a layer of intensity and exclusivity that strengthens the emotional bond. Secrecy becomes its own kind of intimacy. Every private message, every late-night meeting, every glance across the room becomes laced with emotional charge. For the subordinate, the boss is no longer just someone who signs their paycheck. They become a central figure of emotional safety, inspiration, and desire. For the boss, there's often a thrill mixed with the comfort of having someone who looks up to them in ways that go beyond their job title. In this environment, it's easy for both parties to rationalize what's happening. They might say it's not about power, it's about connection. But the truth is that the very dynamic that enabled the connection, the professional hierarchy, is the same one that complicates it. This uneven footing is especially dangerous because it leaves one party vulnerable. The subordinate might begin to feel emotionally trapped, unsure whether their feelings are truly reciprocated or simply tolerated out of convenience or ego. There is often an underlying fear that if the relationship ends or is exposed, their career could suffer, or worse, they could be labeled as the one who caused the affair. The boss, on the other hand, may begin to struggle with boundaries, justifying continued emotional entanglement because they enjoy the comfort, flattery, or emotional security it provides. This reciprocal dependency, fueled by the power imbalance, makes it incredibly difficult to detach, even when both parties are aware that what's happening is emotionally risky, ethically questionable, and potentially harmful to others in their lives. The emotional consequences ripple far beyond the office walls. The spouse or partner of someone emotionally entangled in such a dynamic often reports sensing a shift long before any confession or discovery. The emotional unavailability, the increasing secrecy, and the misplaced attention all start to erode the trust at home. Emotional affairs, especially those rooted in power dynamics, have a tendency to destabilize not just marriages or long-term relationships, but also the individuals involved. The person caught in the affair may experience confusion, guilt, shame, and internal conflict, often grappling with the realization that their feelings were born in an environment where real consent and equality were, at best, murky. These real-life infidelity stories rooted in office hierarchies reveal the subtle emotional manipulation that can arise without clear malicious intent. The danger isn't always in physical betrayal, but in how emotional closeness becomes weaponized through authority, leaving one person emotionally entangled and the other unknowingly or knowingly in control. What starts as an innocent work relationship often evolves into something that redefines trust, loyalty, and emotional integrity, and the damage left in its wake is often far more complex than people assume. Emotional attachment over physical desire is one of the most misunderstood forms of infidelity, often dismissed or downplayed because there is no visible betrayal. Yet, for many, it is the most painful and complex form of cheating. It doesn't begin with touching, kissing, or bedroom secrets. It begins with conversations, understanding, and a feeling of being emotionally fulfilled in ways their partner at home no longer offers. In countless real-life stories, emotional infidelity begins in subtle, almost unnoticeable ways. A colleague, friend, or acquaintance starts to fill the emotional gaps that have quietly grown in a relationship. It's not that the person set out to cheat, it's that they were starved of connection, and suddenly someone offered them emotional nourishment. In long-term relationships, emotional neglect can take many forms. A partner might stop asking how your day was, become consumed with work or parenting, or assume that love is understood without needing to be spoken or shown. Over time, resentment and loneliness build in silence. When someone else enters the picture and starts offering attention, empathy, and genuine interest, it feels like breathing after holding it for too long. The betrayal begins not with an affair of the body, but an affair of the mind. Emotional intimacy becomes the glue binding two people who never intended to be anything more than friends. They begin to look forward to each other's messages, share their inner thoughts, talk about hopes, fears, regrets, all things they stopped discussing with their partners at home. Unlike physical infidelity, which might be limited to specific encounters, emotional infidelity can become a persistent presence. It follows a person to bed, on vacation, into their thoughts at random moments. It can often feel more intense than a sexual affair because it touches deeper vulnerabilities. The need to feel wanted, understood, and emotionally safe. People entangled in emotional affairs often say things like, "We never even slept together," as if that excuses the betrayal. But the pain their partner feels is often sharper because the bond that was supposed to be sacred, the emotional closeness, was given to someone else. What makes emotional attachment so powerful is that it creates a version of intimacy that feels more authentic than what exists at home. With no history of arguments, bills, or domestic stress, the emotional affair thrives in an idealized space. It's filled with longing, fantasy, and what-ifs. The emotional third party becomes the confidant, the secret keeper, the one who makes the person feel alive again. And because there's often no physical line crossed, at least at first it becomes easier to justify. They tell themselves it's just talking, just friendship, just someone who gets them. But the emotional investment begins to eclipse the one with their partner. Suddenly, their spouse becomes the outsider, and the emotional connection becomes the true relationship, even if it's never formally acknowledged. This form of cheating is particularly devastating when discovered. Many betrayed partners say that emotional cheating feels worse than physical because it suggests a deeper, more meaningful connection. They can forgive a drunken nightstand, but not the months of late night texts, the private jokes, the secrets, the confessions. It means their partner chose to emotionally rely on someone else, chose to make another person their safe space. In the aftermath, rebuilding trust is especially hard because emotional betrayal is not about sex, it's about love, or at least something close enough to it that it threatens the foundation of a committed relationship. Real life stories are full of people who never intended to cheat, who never even touched the person they became attached to, but still lost their relationship because they gave their heart away first. Emotional affairs rarely start with intention but almost always end with consequences. The human need to be seen and valued can override even the strongest moral boundaries when that need goes unmet for too long. Emotional desire, when fulfilled elsewhere, can be just as destructive as any physical act of infidelity, and in many cases more enduring. Guilt and double lives are two of the most tormenting realities that come with emotional or physical infidelity. People who find themselves entangled in secret affairs, especially emotional ones, often live in a state of mental and emotional fragmentation. On the outside, they continue to fulfill their roles: wife, husband, parent, employee, while internally carrying a weight of guilt that doesn't leave them, even in moments of joy or success. This duality creates a constant emotional tension, a sense of living a life split between two worlds. The betrayal isn't just against a partner, but also against the self, a violation of personal values, integrity, and identity. Over time, the double life starts to wear them down, and what initially felt thrilling or emotionally fulfilling begins to feel like a burden that's too heavy to carry. The guilt often starts small in fleeting moments: a glance at their partner's face during dinner, knowing they were thinking about someone else, a loving message from their spouse that feels undeserved, a child's laughter that hits differently when they realize they've been prioritizing their own emotional needs over the stability of their home. These are quiet, everyday moments that turn into sharp reminders of the emotional betrayal in progress. Many people report that guilt becomes an ever-present background noise, affecting their sleep, their mood, and their sense of peace. It doesn't just emerge when things go wrong, it's there when things go right too, like a shadow behind every moment that should have felt genuine. Maintaining a double life requires secrecy, and secrecy breeds stress. There's a constant need to delete messages, hide call logs, create cover stories, and manage time in a way that allows both lives to function without colliding. This juggling act is emotionally exhausting and often creates a sense of paranoia. People begin to look over their shoulder, afraid of being discovered. They rehearse lies, they avoid conversations that might reveal too much, and they feel disconnected from the people who are supposed to be closest to them. The emotional toll becomes evident in subtle but growing ways: irritability, anxiety, withdrawal, and even depression. Many people report feeling like they are no longer themselves, that the affair has turned them into someone they no longer recognize. Interestingly, those living double lives often justify their actions through complex mental gymnastics. They might convince themselves that their partner doesn't understand them, that their spouse stopped trying, or that they deserve happiness after years of neglect or emotional distance. These justifications help ease the guilt temporarily, but they rarely hold up under the weight of reality. Deep down, most people know that dishonesty, no matter how justified it feels, is still dishonesty. They carry that awareness like a hidden wound, even when they try to cover it with emotional rationalizations. Another painful layer to this experience is the awareness that, eventually, something will break. Secrets don't stay hidden forever, and the longer the double life continues, the greater the risk of exposure. Many live with the ticking clock of inevitable discovery, whether through a misplaced text, a change in behavior, or a moment of emotional vulnerability that slips past their defenses. This knowledge keeps them on edge, always anticipating consequences while hoping they won't come. Yet when the truth does surface, because it almost always does, the fallout is devastating. The betrayed partner isn't just hurt by the act of cheating. They're shattered by the lies, the secrecy, the fact that the person they trusted most was living a different emotional truth. Guilt and the weight of living a double life are not just moral issues. They are emotional and psychological crises. They erode self-esteem, mental health, and one's sense of identity. Real-life stories of infidelity often focus on the initial thrill or emotional connection, but underneath is always the same painful truth. The cost of that connection is often a deep, corrosive guilt that can't be easily escaped, and a divided life that eventually collapses under its own weight. Consequences of crossing boundaries in emotionally charged relationships are rarely immediate, but they are almost always inevitable. What often starts as a seemingly harmless connection, an exchange of vulnerability, a bit of playful banter, a conversation that goes a little deeper than it can quickly unravel the trust that took years to build. Emotional boundaries are often invisible and subjective, which makes them easier to breach without realizing how far someone has already gone. The danger lies in the assumption that if there's no physical intimacy, there's no real harm done. But emotional betrayal can have consequences that are just as profound, if not more, than physical infidelity. When someone begins to invest their emotional energy, time, and affection into another person outside of their relationship, they slowly start withdrawing from their partner without even recognizing it. One of the earliest consequences is emotional detachment from the original relationship. When someone becomes emotionally entangled with another person, their partner often notices the shift in subtle ways. Conversations become shorter, physical affection may decline, and the sense of partnership begins to weaken. This emotional drift is not always deliberate, but it is real. The partner on the receiving end might start to feel like they are competing with a ghost, someone they can't see, but whose presence is felt in the disconnection. This feeling of being replaced, not sexually but emotionally, leads to deep insecurity, self-doubt, and emotional pain. The person having the emotional affair often doesn't see this immediately because they're so caught up in the excitement and novelty of the new connection. As the emotional involvement deepens, secrecy becomes a necessary part of maintaining both relationships. The person crossing the boundary must begin hiding messages, fabricating explanations, and being emotionally dishonest. Even if they're not physically cheating, they are living with a secret that is shaping their thoughts, actions, and intentions. This secrecy is not harmless. It creates a foundation of dishonesty that erodes the original relationship. One lie leads to another, and soon the emotional affair becomes an alternate life that must be carefully hidden and managed. The mental strain of this duplicity often leads to stress, anxiety, and even health problems, as the emotional toll of living in conflict with one's values takes hold. The consequences extend beyond the relationship and into the individual's identity. People who cross emotional boundaries often struggle with internal conflict. feeling like they are no longer the person they thought they were. This loss of integrity can manifest in guilt, shame, and confusion, especially when they begin to question their own motivations and decisions. They might ask themselves, was it love? Was it loneliness? Was it worth it? These unanswered questions can lead to a long period of self-reflection, regret, and emotional pain long after the emotional affair has ended. In some cases, crossing emotional boundaries does lead to physical affairs, escalating the betrayal to another level. But even if it doesn't, the emotional betrayal alone is often enough to destroy a relationship. When discovered, emotional affairs create a rupture of trust that is incredibly difficult to repair. The betrayed partner may feel like the emotional core of their relationship has been stolen and given to someone else. It becomes difficult to believe anything the person says afterward, because the emotional intimacy they believed was exclusive was being shared elsewhere. Rebuilding from that kind of betrayal takes immense effort, and even then, some relationships never recover. Furthermore, the damage isn't limited to the primary couple. Children, friends, and even colleagues can become collateral damage. Family routines may break down, professional reputations may suffer, and social circles may fracture under the weight of the betrayal. Emotional affairs, especially those born out of professional or close personal relationships, often leave a trail of confusion and hurt that touches many more lives than expected. Real life stories of infidelity are full of people who thought they were in control, who believed they could manage the boundary without crossing it, and who discovered too late that even the smallest steps into emotional intimacy with someone outside their relationship could lead to far-reaching consequences that permanently altered their lives.